大家好，
你们好，
欢迎你们来参加我们的中国文化和商业的课程。My name is Honorific Mikey,
my name is Xiaobai Nash.
and we have put together a group of 3 videos to go over Chinese business tactics and cultural points to know as you expand your business and your knowledge into Asia.
And I guess the purpose of these lessons, obviously, they're not the most comprehensive lessons. They're very brief, 10 to 12 minutes. But our goal in these is just to help you have a little bit of an edge when going into business in China, or whether it be politics or just communicating with anybody from a high context type culture. And so the first lesson we're going to go over today is how to write a sales letter in Chinese, because it's very common, whether it's whatever field you're working in, to write a letter back and forth, whether you're trying to sell a product to someone, receive a product, create a relationship with anybody. There's different cultural type things that if you know them, it can make it a lot easier.
Yeah, and more than learning the vocabulary, we want to teach you the cultural points that are necessary for doing business here. Whether or not they speak English or whether or not you speak Chinese, uh, these are different pressure points that you're going to come across, issues, you could say, that could really be detrimental to striking a deal or developing a deep, lasting relationship with each of these companies. So, like you said, like Nash said, our first lesson is on how to write sales letters in Chinese.
So the first topic we want to go over, just briefly, is the difference between a high context and a low context culture. So this is very important when considering communicating, especially if it's someone that communicates normally in a different language or in a high context versus low context type language. So for us as Americans who speak English, we come from a relatively low context culture. Meaning, if I want something, I'm very direct. I rely completely on verbal communication to get my point across. And that's a low context culture, but compared to a high context culture that relies heavily on nonverbal cues, it relies heavily on culture and very implicit communication. That would be hard to bridge the gap if you didn't realize that.
And this is something that you see time and time again in Asian countries. Japan, China, Taiwan, they rely heavily on nonverbal communication. For example, let's say you are receiving a gift from somebody with from China. When they give that gift to you, what they're going to do is they're going to give it to you two-handed as a sign of respect, as a sign of appreciation for you, and as a sign of um, their love and their compassion for you in giving you this. And um, as a way to express your appreciation outside of saying thank you and you appreciate it, is to grab it with 2 hands as well, and with a um, bowing motion also. This shows that you are communicating with them your appreciation, you're expressing your respect, you're expressing your admiration for what they have given you. And this in itself says more to them about your feelings towards um, the gift than anything that you could say verbally.
Also, it shows that you care a lot about their culture, right? That you took the time to actually know that, yes, this is something that's very important in their culture. If you wanted to make a comparison, you could be the best talker, the best salesman ever, create a whole pitch and sells whatever, if you're selling a product or whatever. And if they hand you a gift at the end and you kind of just grab it with one hand flippantly and kind of put in your bag or whatever, I would say that'd be game over. But you can have someone that's not very, I guess, eloquent in their speech, but if they hit all these social cues, if they hit all of these high context type cultural things, bowing, using honorific terms when they speak to them, I think that would go a lot longer way for a high context culture than anything that you could say.
And throughout these 3 videos, you're going to notice a theme that these are foundational points that we will continue to come back to. High context versus low context is something that's very, very important when deliberately communicating with these people and trying to um, show respect and show that you care. So this is, we're going to go over this briefly. Our next lesson is going to be about face. And I'll just give you a quick definition of what face is and why it's important to the Chinese culture. Face in English, you can relate it to social status. Some would say clout, some would say ego, some would say how you are seen or perceived by the outside world.
And face is a very very important structural piece to the way that you communicate and the way that business or any other dealings are done in China. So there's kind of like a, I guess you would say, a hierarchy of having lots of face or little face, and depends on your actions in the community, who you know, what you do. It all forms how much face you have. And like Mikey said, we'll go into that a little bit more, but what we wanted to touch on here real quick was just positive face and negative face. So positive face is mainly like gaining face, and things that you can do to gain face would be to praise others or receive appreciation or approval from others. Obviously the people you know, if you connect with people who have more face, or if you know people, that would obviously be positive for you as well.
Then talking about negative face, this is when you are trying to reclaim face. For one reason or another, you have lost face in the eyes of somebody, and you're trying to do your best to regain what you have lost. So this could come in the form of an apology, of public denouncement, of really trying extra hard to
Right the
wrong, different things like that. So these are the two sides of it that you will see. And I do believe that we have face. Obviously, we talk about social status, and that's something that's important to us in American and English culture. But you won't hear it talked about as much as you do in Chinese. And when you're over in Asia, it's something that's very, very relevant and very, very prominent in conversation, in priority, in their ways of communicating. This is something that's always at the forefront of their minds.
Okay, so now I think I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but honorific forms. This is a very key part of communicating, especially to show respect for who it is that you're speaking to. So it's very important to know who you're speaking to. So if you are reaching out to an executive of a business, or if you're reaching out to someone that has more face than you, like what Mikey had just said, it's important to know what their title is, who they are, and refer to them appropriately. A good example would be if I was reaching out to like an executive of a business or someone that had much higher social status than I did, and if I said, "Hey, what's up, dude?" like that would not go over very well, and that wouldn't be very professional. But if I said, hello, President so and so, or hello, I can't even think of another example.
Mr. Sir, how are you doing today?
Mr. Sir.
Yeah. But knowing these terms is going to be very beneficial to your first impression with these individuals. As you can see, we've written out a couple, not a lot, but just a few that you'll see very regularly when speaking and writing in Chinese. Number one is just about the safest bet for any man. Xian Sheng is a way to talk to a man, to approach him. Say, "Hey, Mr. White, how are you doing today?"
Great.
How are you doing today? If you're not completely positive about where you stand with them, Xian Sheng is a very safe bet. On the other end of that, 女士 for a miss or ms is an appropriate first title that you give somebody if you're not completely sure what it is. And then you can form a different title for them based off of how they introduce themselves, or based off of the experience you have with them, or what you learn from them, or what you learn about them. So this is where it comes into Fu Ren. So Mrs. These in American culture are pretty important to get correctly. But I would say it's even more important in Chinese culture that you refer to these individuals with the correct title. This shows a certain level of focus and concentration and respect that you are going out of your way to use a specific term to appropriately call them. The next one that we have on here is 总经理. So 总, if you are familiar with the language, 总is a title more used for a leader of the public. So 总统 is how you would say president of the United States. 总经理, I would say, is the president of a large corporation. 总 is something that you'll use when it's a larger public figure. 经理 is how I would just refer to my manager at work, my manager at the grocery store, my manager in any of those specific sense, at Lee's Marketplace. But making sure to use these is extremely important, and using them correctly. Referring to an individual that has passed away, it's always very important to use the term 先贤, acknowledging them for the great life they lived, as well as respecting their family name, is shown when you use this term. And the last one that we have on here is 您, and this is the formal version of you. You'll actually see this a lot when it comes to communication, daily communication, not as professional or organized conversation. You'll still use this when it's somebody that you really do look up to, somebody that deserves your respect. So this could be a boss, this could be a parent, this could be a grandparent, this could be a teacher. You will refer to them in the term with the term 您, as opposed to the informal version, which is just 你.
And I think that 您 is kind of a safe bet, and it also applies to all of the words above from it. So 您好, 白先生, that's when you would use it. But I feel like 您 is one of the most common forms, and it's when in doubt, go with 您. That's just kind of the safe bet, and it's formal.
Exactly.
All right, so now this kind of just shows, we'll just briefly touch on this, but this shows the structure and the structural difference between an English sales letter and a Chinese sales letter. Right off the bat, so the left side is the English, the right side is the Chinese. You can see where the red arrow is pointing. Right off the bat, you can just tell that Chinese sales letters first focus on creating and establishing a long-term client relationship. And so this is more of a generational type relationship. This is not, I guess, fake would be a right way to say it.
We're going to use you as we need you, and we'll move on from there.
Correct.
Which is not necessarily unkind in American culture, but that's just how business goes. Chinese main priority, though, in these types of settings and these types of conversations is to be as kind as possible, compassionate as possible, and develop that long-term relationship.
And they believe that this type of respect and relationship that they build helps to promote their product, which it does.
For sure. Okay, and now we're going to go into the actual organizational structure of an English letter as opposed to a Chinese. For the most part, they're very similar, but you can see a couple of differences. For example, the first one, the headline, a heading in English is not even mentioned in a Chinese letter. There's no headline, but it does start with a salutation and a greeting and introductory move. As you can see in the English letter, that's not something that you'll see. Greeting and introductory move is something that Nash just talked about. This is where the Chinese company tries their best to establish this relationship. They'll ask about how you are, why they're interested in your company, how they came to come into contact with you, why they believe you're an upstanding company, and why they want to work with you. And in this part, they'll try their best to praise you, to help you feel good about yourself, and help you to have um, just good thoughts and feel appreciated going into reading the rest of the letter.
Yeah. And just to reciprocate that, if you were in the reverse role, so if you were trying to give a product to someone in China or have them produce a product or whatever it may be, a relationship, you would want to just flip the roles and do the exact same thing. You'd want to know who they are, do the research, try and create a lasting relationship, and that would go a long way with them as well. One last thing to touch on here is you can notice that with the English sales letter, something that they do is they use pressure tactics, and a Chinese sales letter will not use pressure tactics. They're very indirect in their way to push a sale, I guess, and that just has to do with their type of culture, and they try and focus on showing the quality of a product as opposed to pushing something with numbers and trying to get someone to buy now, which is way more, I was going to say an English thing to do. It's more of a low context culture.
Yeah, and this is like he just said, this is the difference between a high context and a low context culture. High context, they're going to focus more on the benefits, focus more on the product, less about the actual inquiry of do you or do you not want this product. Whereas a low context culture, us Americans tend to get right down to it and ask directly, do you want this or do you not want this?
Act now and you get 15% off. Like,
and that also comes with face. They want their product and their perceived value to be known. And so they don't necessarily, they'll never focus mainly on trying to do anything to get you to buy the product by discounting the price. They want it to feel and be perceived as the value that they think it is. And so that's another way that they're going to try to recruit you or advertise to you, is to overemphasize the benefits.
So this is right here, we've got a couple samples of an English and a Chinese sales letter. We can skip the English one for now, just because we don't want this to be too long and have you guys be super bored. So we'll just go straight to the Chinese one. Obviously, you can see it starts off with a salutation, honored company, like we had talked about. It's very important. I would say you can even just go above and beyond. It's always better to be more respectful than less respectful, right? You'd rather dress up than dress down. So always be super respectful. Greetings, show that you're human, right? How's your day? How are things going? Don't just go straight into business. That's something, a fault of English sales letters that you'll see commonly. And then establishing your credentials. Why are you qualified to either pitch this product, or why are you qualified to purchase this, whatever the situation may be. So state your credentials, basically.
As you can see, when they're introducing their product in the Chinese sales letter, they spend a lot more time on doing so. They talk about the high quality of the specific components. They talk about the functionality. They'll talk about why it's a better product than anything else on the market. The main bulk of their letter is trying to indirectly tell you that you need this product very badly. They're not going to tell you straight up saying, buy this now and it will save your life. They're going to tell you why the braking system is great, why it has electric windows, the air conditioning is great, it's an imported engine, things like this, so that subconsciously you say, oh, these are all great things, and therefore I am now going to buy it. So they focus more on what it is as opposed to how they're going to sell it.
And like we touched on before, that they relatively won't mention the price and mainly focus on just the quality of the product and let it speak for itself.
So when it talks about incentives, a lot of the time, like Nash was just saying, they're usually very vague and non-specific. They don't tend to have a price. They often don't offer you a discount right off the bat because they do believe in their product and the value. And it's not that American companies don't do the same, but we tend to turn very quickly to trying our best to just get them to buy it. So we'll do anything that it takes, whether it's lower the price or anything.
Can they see the mouse on here?
I think so.
All right, if you can or can't, apologize. Another thing is with the closing moves is it's a very soft closing move. It's not a relatively hard closing move. You can see here it says, "We welcome you to come and place an order." That's technically that's a move, right? They're asking you, but it's a very soft way of doing so. We welcome you to come place an order or hold trade talks with us. And then it goes into kind of like this is another closing move to welcome a partnership. We will offer you warm-hearted service. Looking forward to hearing from you soon. So that as a, say if I was a consumer or if I was receiving this letter, that comes off very non-threatening, that comes off very genuine, but it's still putting your point across saying that we want to do business and contact us if you'd like to.
Mhm. And as Nash brought up a couple slides ago, he talked about English sales letters usually having very direct pressure tactics. And these a little more subtle, softer, easier to handle, easier to chew on ways of communicating their interest in doing further business with you are their versions of these pressure tactics. And so when you see something like this, don't expect another follow-up letter saying, hey, this is how much it is and we want you to buy. Will you do so? Just know that this is the way that they're going to communicate this information to you. And now it's the ball is in your court to make that next move and get a little bit more information.
Something that we touched on at the very beginning, we said how important face was, how important creating a relationship first was, how important high context culture was. These, like we said at the beginning, will be common themes with everything that we talk about with this lecture, with the other two as well. And just from briefly going over that letter, you can tell that relationship is first. It's very high context type communication. And we can go into this with the other lecture as well, but face, whoever is writing this sales letter, they're not only representing themselves, but they're representing this company as a whole. And so they need to protect not only their personal face, but the company's face as well.
Mhm. Great. And that's what we have for you today for this first lesson. It will be followed by a 5-question quiz, just helping to check for understanding, see where you're at, see how you feel about this information, and hopefully you can retain it a little bit better. Thanks for listening. 再见哦。
再见。